So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay. And today, once again, we have kind of a pseudo siege going on because it's more, well, it is a cityscape battle really, because both factions will be able to inhabit the town that lies in the middle because this is the Winter Hamlet map. And yeah, so it's not really a siege as such, it's going to be more of a cityscape battle, but obviously it is going to be quite a bit different than just your standard open field battle because of course there's a lot more going on, there's a lot more narrower areas that both sides will be able to use their advantage. And also this is a bit of an evil civil war going on today because there's only one faction, there's only one good faction, morally good faction, that's on the field today, and that's going to be the Dwarves of Khazad. Every other faction is going to be an evil faction, so we shall see who shall be victorious between the forces of, I suppose, Sauron and Saruman, because we're going to have Mordor on one side and Isengard on the other. Speaking of which, Bogdan, 18k, is the player who sent me the battle replay, so big thank you to him. I decided to do this one because, again, much like how Blindness sent me a replay and I sort of put it off for quite a while because it was a map I'd already done, but Bogdan has sent me a couple of replays, so I do feel that I should do one of his right now and you know, make it so that it doesn't feel like I'm ignoring someone. And this one is a good map as well. Like I've played on this map a few times, I've shown it a couple of times as well. It's definitely one that can work out in multiple ways, and it definitely has a lot of interest with the settlement in the middle. There's a few buildings around the outside, even like right around the edge of the map there's a lot of trees that can be utilised by both sides as well. But we'll go through the blue team first and foremost. So the forces of Saruman in this hypothetical civil war situation are going to be headed up by Bogdan, 18k. He's got some half-orc spear guard here on the front line, which, to be fair, are a unit which, you know, maybe you don't see as Isengard as much as maybe you should. I think that, you know, Isengard, obviously they can often get away with just using their Uruk-hai triumvirate of pikes, infantry and crossbows, because pikes can hold the front line very easily, infantry have the quality to back that up. But the half-orc spear guard do give Isengard the ability to have a shield wall somewhere in their army, so that shouldn't be taken for granted. You know, shield wall is a very useful ability, especially in a situation like this where you may need it to hold narrower choke points in a settlement like this alongside your pikes. We also have some Uruk-hai archers here at the front. Obviously Isengard, their skirmish line is not the best, but to be fair, none of the orc skirmishers really. Mordor have got a decent one, but the other orc factions definitely struggle when it comes to their bowmen, purely their bowmen anyway. The Uruk-hai archers will at least be able to skirmish with the Mordor archers though, and make it so that Mordor can't just get into range with their archers and force Isengard into any sort of early engagement. Bogdan will have a bit of tactical flexibility there. A combination of Dunlending clansmen and Uruk-hai pikemen on the front line. So Dunlending clansmen, the militia, Isengard, the only orc faction in the game thus far to not have access to one unit that is completely free. Their lowest tier unit are the Dunland clansmen, and they do cost a little bit of money. But in comparison to the orc fodder and such, they are a little bit better because they do have a better anti-cavalry bonus, being Dunlanders. And also alongside the pikes, obviously it does give them a little bit of a cushion against those arrow fire, against that arrow fire. So it should be a pretty decent front line, that, albeit maybe not one that does their killing particularly quickly. They might be relying on stuff like their crossbows back here to do the killing quickly. Obviously a huge amount of stopping power on crossbows, and that's one thing that Isengard certainly brings to the field in abundance. They have obviously a big focus on their Uruk-hai crossbowmen. We have some Nazkai and a couple of units of Uruk-hai berserkers back here, so this is going to be the armour-piercing core of Isengard's infantry. This is certainly where their damage in melee is going to be coming from, especially against Mordor. Most of Mordor's units, after all, get their survivability from their sort of natty orc armour, and yeah, that's not going to be an issue for sort of sword-axe hybrid weapons. There's almost like a giant pick that they use, the berserkers and the Nazkai, but yeah, very, very strong, and should be good against the majority of Mordor's infantry. Snaga skirmishers as well, obviously, you know, cheap javelins, you know, they don't do a lot of base damage at all really, but it is armor piercing damage, and cheap javelins like this are also quite easy to get cost efficiency with. Some wargs in the trees as well to make sure that Mordor aren't going to just sort of sneak around the side over here. Obviously wargs. Isengard and Mordor both have very similar focuses with their cavalry. Isengard much more, well, I would say Isengard maybe slightly more focused around their ability to be anti-cav, you know, with the Champions of the White Hand over here being probably the best anti-cavalry unit in the game when it comes to their damage at the very least. Whereas Mordor do at least have access to one unit of Lancers, but we shall see. They're a little bit isolated from their allies over on this side unless the two factions that are near them come to support, because they're kind of outside the settlement, and to get into the settlement they have to advance towards one another first, or they have to retreat. So it's kind of an interesting situation there. Bogdan's first ally is going to be Hazrama. That's a name I haven't seen for quite a while actually, and he's going to be playing as Rhun. He's got some Inas Rim over here, so the Easterlings joining Saruman's side in this civil war. Some Eastron Guard over here, so a good mix of anti-cavalry and lance cavalry over here. We also have, yeah, that's more Innis Rim. Obviously Innis Rim are technically lancers, so they won't be able to dish out the damage in melee against other cavalry too much, but hopefully that's what the Eastron Guard are for. So that could be the reinforcements that Rhun are going to send over to help Isengard with, and then the rest of their forces will just try and go into the town and sort of stand and fight for as long as they can. And with a unit like the Scion Rim, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. The Scion Rim are a really strong heavy spearman, and they should definitely be able to contest that for a long time. A very reliable unit for Rhun. Gnar Rim, once again, like I've seen very often when we've seen Rhun recently, people have been going for the Gnar Rim over the Variag Mercenaries. And to be honest with you, I actually rate the Variag Mercenaries slightly higher. They may not deal the same level of damage as the Gnar Rim, but I think just from a skirmish fight perspective, especially seeing as you can upgrade their armour, they're just more useful in that regard. Like the Gnar Rim, to me, especially in a situation like this where Rhun are probably going to be involved in a lengthy ground war within the town, I think the Gnar Rim are actually slightly worse if the opposing team takes advantage of their lack of a shield, but that's just my opinion. Scion Rim back here as well. We've also got the Cummels, Dragon Knights. Obviously Rhun, very much an all-rounder of a faction. They've got options all over their roster, and the Dragon Knights are obviously the pinnacle of their cav force. Very, very tanky knights, lance knights at that. Flag Rim and Gamp Rim, obviously the classic runic front line. A lot of AP, a phalanx, as well as the Flag Rim being very, very solid line infantry in their own right. And then back here we have, actually this is from Khan, so Blue Ranger of Khan. He has got some Nurad Windblades back here, which are really, really quick melee cavalry unit. I don't know if you could call them melee knights as such. They're kind of a weird unit to behold. They're very unique in that sense. When it comes to melee cavalry, they are one of the best in the game. They do get out-muscled by stuff like the Haven Knights, for example, or something like the Champions of the White Hand. But their speed means that if a unit tries to escape the Windblades, they're simply not going to be able to, because they're so quick. We have some Variag Horse Archers back here, which of course will deliver some support from afar. We have the main body of the Khandish line. We have some nomadic raiders at the front, so they're cheapest archers, backed up by some upgraded Variag bowmen. So in much the same way as the Balagire archers of Umbar and Numenor, you know, they have a little buckler to help them in skirmish fights, and they can have their armour upgraded to help them even more. Very good archer for this sort of situation, I think, although they do have a slightly more open section of the field, but still, they do have the dwarves helping them out as well. Nomadic light infantry is a very cheap option, of course. They're not particularly good, but they can offer a decent meat shield for more important units, especially when it comes to blocking arrows from hitting the Nurad Halberds, which will be the true core of Khan's line infantry over here. We've got some Brotherhood of the Sword, probably my least favourite Brotherhood unit, to be honest with you. The Brotherhood of the Axe tend to do more damage. Brotherhood of the Spear tend to hold out for far longer, but the Brotherhood of the Sword are, I think, the cheapest of the bunch. So if you get them in and you get them sort of fighting alongside some of the other Khandish infantry, their high melee defense can really help them stay fighting for a long time, I suppose. We have some Variag Warriors, which are the heavy swordsmen that Khan can bring. One of the cheapest heavy swordsmen in the game, which of course means in terms of stats they're not particularly fantastic in comparison to some others. But their low cost does also mean that you have to spend less resources to field them, and to be honest with you, with their higher melee defense, they can be a very useful thing to have on the front line alongside some of your cheaper units. So a unit which shouldn't be underestimated, much like the Black Uruks of the mountains for Misty. We have some Nomadic Rangers, so some cheaper Javelins once again, and finally some Nurad Stormguard. When it comes to Khandish infantry, this really is the cream of the crop. They don't have a phalanx formation anymore, which made them, disgustingly awkward to try and fight previously. But they still form a very similar sort of role. Get them in on the front line alongside your other units, and breaking through Khan in the front, their infantry suddenly becomes a lot more difficult. And then finally, we have Valsarion, who's going to be playing as Khazad, the one non-evil faction today, but maybe Khazad see an opportunity to gather some riches while fighting alongside Saruman, I suppose. We have some Dwarven Miners, so some AP on the front line, cheap AP. Warriors of Khazad, while they may be the cheapest line infantry option for the dwarves, of course, in terms of quality, they're still going to be far in excess of most of what the other factions will be able to field in terms of their basic line infantry. We have some 4th Legion Shield Guard, a really good unit. Spears, of course, they are subject to the Spear Malice now, but even so, they're such a good unit that the Spear Malice is not such a problem for them, to be honest with you. Back here, some 1st Legion Pikes, one of the strongest units of pikes in the game. The red team will have to be very careful of them. Orc Hunters over here on the side, getting out some stakes. We have some Hammers of Gundabad. We have some Iron Watch of Miramir, which a very interesting unit, maybe not working fully as intended at the moment, There is a way that you can sort of cheese them and make them grossly effective, but I kind of doubt that's going to be the case here. We'll see how the Iron Watch get on. Guards of Khazad and also some Sons of the Fallen over here. Looks like they're going to try and adopt a defensive posture, as the dwarves often do. But I wouldn't imagine there's going to be too much in the way of lightning quick engagements over on this side, because if the dwarves are setting up defensively, Khazad is almost certainly going to set up defensively. We'll see if he is forced to move forward in this particular engagement. He's playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, heavy Goblin Archers here on the front alongside some Goblin Archers, so a lot of cheap skirmishers. I think we kind of know what to expect from Khazad at this point. A lot of his army's hidden, of course, because that's just how he rolls. He sits in the trees and sort of layers up his army, making it very awkward to engage him in a way that you would deem sort of easy to do, I suppose. White Uruk Fearmongers back here. We also have some Bolgs champions with Azog at their helm, so obviously very, very good anti-cavalry units. Maybe not so useful against the dwarves, and also Khan's cavalry is probably going to head over to the other side of the field, to be honest with you, but we shall see. Khazad, however, probably does need to move forward because the rest of his allies seem to want to. Speaking of which, we have Khvorin Andre. I'm just going to call him Khvorin. He's playing as Rhudaur, so he's got some Franadine nobles without the armor upgrade, but to be honest with you, like I said, I kind of prefer the unupgraded variant of the Franadine. And the Franadine nobles, obviously Lance Knights. Slightly lower defense values all around, but AP and melee to make up for that. Rhudaur swordsman here, so with Rhudaur you kind of know what to expect. They have a lot in terms of numbers. Rhudaur clansmen and swordsmen to sort of saturate the front line with. Some Dunman spearmen here as well. But they also have some units of genuine quality, like the Witch Realm Enslavers. Granadine pikemen are fantastic to have on the front line as well. They always perform very well, in addition to those shields also making it so that archers can't just have their way with them. Some Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters, some Rhudaur marksmen and some Dunman spearmen. So yeah, Rhudaur definitely deploying forwards, wanting to occupy the town as much as possible, maybe get a bit of cover among these buildings. But yeah, it's going to be the battlefield, the centre here, so we'll see how well that goes. We have Angmar, played by Starkiller X. He's got some Angmar halberds on the front. He's got some Blackwatch Legion just in behind, so we'll see if a pushing unit like this is going to come in useful. It might. We have some Gundabad Guard, we have some Trolls of Gundabad, we have some Witchers. Last time we saw the Witchers, they were completely useless, and on a map like this as well, a little bit more open, the Witchers will be a little bit more difficult to use. Witch Realm Blackguard, Guardians of Khan Doom. We have some Witch Realm Inquisitors, obviously melee knights, and also some Trolls of Angmar as well. So Angmar always go for a little bit more quality. We'll see if that pays off here. Of course, Angmar maybe don't have the ability to respond with arrows as much as they could, so maybe the Narim were a good idea from Hazarama after all. And then finally, heading up this red team, we have Mordor, so Sauron himself, played by Wilson. Got some fodder on the front line, got some Morannon archers in behind, so the cheap units, and then getting into the main body of the Morannon. So Morannon units are not going to be up to the same sort of level as the Uruk-hai, but to be fair, there's not as many Uruk-hai as maybe Isengard normally bring from the Isengard composition, so stuff like the Morannon halberds won't be completely outmatched by tons and tons of pikemen, backed up by tons and tons of infantry. Morannon infantry, of course, not on the same level as Uruk-hai infantry either, but Mordor do have better or more varied higher end options. The Orc Maulers with some AP will be useful. The Nazgul are, of course, something that Isengard don't have an equivalent to. The Temple Executioners also are different from the Nazkai. The Nazkai have got more of an AP slant to them, whereas the Temple Executioners are all about that base damage and that melee defense. Orc Javelins back here, some Temple Guard with their armor-piercing arrows, and of course, Olag-hai and Melkor's Chosen. And there may be a few other units hidden in the trees as well for Mordor to see if they can take advantage of such things. But without further ado, let's begin. And I'm not really sure who I would back. I think I would probably back the blue team just based on the players involved. Like, I cannot imagine Khazad is going to want to move forward. We'll see what Rhudaur want to do. But also, I just have a feeling. You know, I have a feeling based on the compositions. I think that the blue team maybe have got a bit more of a thought out comp. But you can see Mordor are moving forward, so Wilson certainly not backwards in coming forwards. Angmar are also going to move forward. I mean, Angmar, to be fair, how much in the way of archers do they actually have? They've got some Snaga Stalkers, but that is not archers. So if they don't have any archers at all, they're going to need to just barrel through the settlement at maximum speed. They will, of course, have the benefit of their allies' archers, the Rhudaur marksmen, already opening up onto the advancing runic soldiers. But having said that, it is the Scion Rim, and it is from the front, so the thicker Easterling armour, those large square shields, not going to be too much of an issue for the Scion Rim to absorb rather inaccurate fire from the Rhudaur marksmen. Angmar coming forward. I mean, Rhun do need to be a little bit careful. They're a little bit spread thin. And if Rhudaur and Angmar decide to come forward all at once, Rhun are going to need some pretty heavy support from Khazad and Khazad. And to be honest with you, Khazad and Khazad are not going to need to worry about Khazad moving forwards, I don't think. It's just not in his DNA. Rim starting to fire, but you can see they're already taking damage because, again, lack of a shield. Lower numbers as well in comparison to the archers they're going to be facing off against. Neither the Rhudaur marksman nor the Rim do too well under arrow fire. But the Rhudaur marksmen are cheaper. Rhudaur can just afford to do this for longer. It's also quite nice to see that Rhun have not brought the Dragon's Breath. It kind of skews every fight that it's in at the moment. In come the Carmel's Dragon Knights, although they've actually stopped charging there, which is a bit of a mistake because they're not going to take any losses from point blank fire like that, but their hit points will be shaved off from that. They do manage to get a charge, but now the Rhudaur swordsman could try and block off their retreat. The pikes are coming in. Could be a bit of a... That charge maybe wasn't the most thought out move that Khazad could have made there, and now the Dragon Knights need to get out of here before the pikes start having any lasting impact. Looks like they are going to get out of there though, and of course the Rim are continuing to fire. The fire arrows might look devastating, but they're purely cosmetic. Oh, there goes the Runic General as well, so definitely paying for being a bit over-exuberant there, Khazad. Rhune's morale is not terrible, but you don't want to be losing your general that early for no good reason, really. Meanwhile, Isengard pulling back a little bit, stretching the army out. Mordor, meanwhile, moving further into the trees over here, which is actually further away from his allies. He does have the benefit of the Witch-Arm Inquisitors coming over to help out from Angmar, though. Interesting battle so far, the dynamics. Mordor getting further away, but not wanting to go directly into the front of the Isengard army because that puts him closer to the support from Khazad's runic troops. But to be honest with you, I think, for me, the thing that Angmar and Rhudaur should be doing here is being very aggressive, I think. Rhun are kind of isolated here. When you really consider things, Isengard need to maintain their position, otherwise Mordor are going to rush them. And Khazad and Khazad are moving around the houses, which, to be honest, gives you the ideal opportunity to just plough forwards and try and deal with Rhun quickly. And I'm a little bit surprised they're not doing that, actually, because it seems like an obvious thing to do. Meanwhile, they're just kind of sat here and they're allowing some of their more vulnerable units, like their halberdiers, to get shot up by the Rim, which, means that, to be honest with you, Rhun are being allowed to get away with murder here, really. Although it's less Rhune's fault because that's where they started. I feel as though the longer that the red team remains static, the worse it's going to be for them, because Khand are on their way round now. If Khazad continues to just sort of sit there in position, Khazad will be able to set up a very effective wall over here for Khand to then come in and wrap up the lines while Rhun just holds from the front. So we could have a bit of a disaster on the cards for the red team here, and again, this is an example of why you want to be aggressive sometimes. I feel as though the vast majority of Total War players just in general like to be more defensive. They like to sit in place and they like to let their ranged units do the work, especially newer players, but to be fair, most of these players I have seen before. So I'd expect maybe a little bit more savvy play from them perhaps, but it hasn't turned out to be the case thus far. Meanwhile, Moran on archers getting into position, so Mordor and Isengard shooting at one another through the trees, although to be honest I think it's just Mordor at the moment that are doing the business. The Uruk-hai archers sort of cycling around to the side over here, so some free hits for Mordor, but to be honest with you, I think most of these hits are going to go into the Dunlending clansmen, which that's no great loss to be honest with you, although they are hidden. Pikes here on the front line, so Isengard, they know what they're all about in this battle. What they want is Mordor to come into them, engage their front line, and then as soon as Mordor have overcommitted, move in with their Berserkers and their Nazkai to do the heavy lifting in melee. But of course you can't really afford to do that too quickly. Meanwhile, Innes Rim charging in once again, and once again I had to say, very slow and plodding reactions here from Rhudaur and Angmar, who I'm a little bit disappointed with already, to be honest with you. They have a golden opportunity presented to them to do some really good work, and they're not taking it, which is unfortunate. Meanwhile, you can see back here the Variag Cataphracts are moving in, charging into the Thranodine Nobles, and the Variag Cataphracts I think got the better end of that charge, which that's going to be all the advantage they need to win this fight, I think. I mean, the AP on the Thranodine Nobles is important, but the most devastating attack that a knight has is going to be their charge, and if you can get the better end of a charge, you're going to win the fight. And the Franadine Nobles having to retreat there. The Variag Cataphracts doing the business. Variag Horse Archers coming in also. I mean, the Orcs of the Misty Mountains are over here, the Bulks champions, but Corrigan, I mean, this is the sort of thing that I would be extremely concerned. Well, you can see Franadine Rangers also trying to support their knights here, but the Franadine Rangers revealing themselves to the full might of the Khandish skirmish line as well, so they're going to need to scurry back within the town itself. And again, like, allies like this who just want to sit in the corner are always like, I'd hate it, because like they're quite willing to just throw you under the bus for the possibility that they can then pull it back in the late game, when so often that is not the case. Meanwhile, in comes Rhudaur Swordsman. I'm not really sure what Rhudaur hope to accomplish by throwing a single unit of depleted swordsmen in. The Scion Rim are going to be more than enough to deal with a fight like this. These houses starting to catch light from the Nar Rim volleys. The Scion Rim going to reposition themselves. The Rhudaur Swordsmen are over here. I'm very surprised, like, in particular, I have to say, I'm a little bit more disappointed with Angmar in this situation. I mean, Angmar have selected their army clearly based on its abilities to be hyper-aggressive, because they don't have archers. And yet they're not being hyper-aggressive, they're just sat there. Very strange indeed. Rhudaur setting up a position over here. Khan continuing to move around. I mean, I suppose at the very least Corrigan is getting his wish, and there are some units heading in range of him, but I mean, there's Goblin Infantry over here, which Goblin Infantry are going to do nothing against Dwarven Infantry. Khazad Infantry is some of the best in the game, and especially when it comes to absorbing punishment, and Goblin Infantry can dish out so little punishment. Another charge coming in, this time from the Dragon's Wrath Warlords. Not a huge amount of damage dealt to the Rhudaur Swordsman, but still something for them to consider. The Dragon's Wrath Warlords actually breaking though. The Franadine Nobles surrounding them, getting a little bit too far ahead of themselves really. The Angmar Halberds continuing to die. I mean, look at all the corpses that are on the floor over here. And look at how small the runic resistance is over here. It pains me to see people not being aggressive when it would be the best thing to do. It's so clear it would be the best thing to do, but I mean, now I suppose it's a little bit more in question, because Khan have the ability now to quickly and rapidly advance forward and go around them, but that wasn't the case at the start of the battle. Heavy Goblin Crossbowmen revealing themselves from the trees, bolts coming forward. I mean, this is something which the dwarves are going to have to respond to in kind now. I mean, Valsarion can't really just sort of sit here and sort of trade blows with the goblins as they're doing. I mean, to be honest with you, the best way to deal with what Corrigan's doing here as the Khazad is to just move forward and squash them. The Misty Mountains simply do not have the quality to deal with sort of the level of Khazad infantry that have been brought here. So just move forward, squash him, and move on. Again, it's another example of maybe an army not being as aggressive as it should be. This time on the other side, though. You can see now that Khan's starting to shoot into the side of the Angmar Rhudaur position. Well, that's the ironic thing. You don't move. You're static. And you're going to be made to pay for it. Rhudaur Swordsmen are going to head over here. Again, they're going to try and force, I think, these Variag Bowmen to retreat, but that's not going to happen because there's some Variag warriors standing in the way. And to be honest with you, Rhudaur Swordsmen a little bit depleted. Variag warriors probably slightly the stronger unit in melee in this situation. I mean, numbers-wise, 2 units of Rhudaur Swordsmen should probably be enough, to be honest with you. Witch Realm Inquisitors moving in from Angmar. Not sure what they want to accomplish, to be honest with you, but we do have a melee engagement within the town at long last. Interesting, interesting. Meanwhile, there are some engagements happening in the trees now. Champions of the White Hand charging into the Olag High, and of course one thing that trolls cannot really take is a charge, especially now. Champions of the White Hand and Wargs just continuing to follow through, getting into them around on archers, so this is definitely good news here for the blue team, as the Wargs and the Champions of the White Hand clearly have managed to compromise the integrity of the Mordor army. Around on archers firing away. There's some Orc Javelins back here as well. The Temple Guard are exposed though, and this is not the sort of unit that Mordor wants to be losing at this stage in the battle. See the Half-Orc Spear Guard also wrapping around. Uruk-hai archers doing the same. More Uruk-hai archers. Variag Horse archers from Khan, so some good teamwork happening here from the blue team as they move around to try and kill off Mordor here. Mordor have moved forward, but again, more good teamwork. A unit of Inas Rim charging into the side of this Mordor assault. Orc Maulers and Morannon Halberdiers heading things up, but Hammer and Anvil at its finest. Pikes obviously make a fantastic anvil, and there are no better hammers than a unit of Lancers. Orc fodder moving in, but they're already shaken, so I can't imagine they're going to last for much longer. Hazrama sending over more reinforcements, which is just a sign again. Rhun were undermanned in the middle, and I think the red team are going to rue their decision to be as meek as they were. I won't call it cowardly, but actually I will. I will call it cowardly. They were cowardly. They should have moved in sooner. And if the red team are going to win this, it will be because the blue team makes serious mistakes from here on out. Half-Orc Spear Guard moving into the back, Uruk-hai Berserkers surrounding this Mordor army. So I think Wilson, he was kind of... If it was just Isengard over here, he might have stood more of a chance, but the support that he got from the Runic Lancers, he's also getting support from some Khandish cavalry as well. It's always going to be difficult if you're this isolated as a player from your allies, and the player you're facing off is getting some support from his allies. It's always going to be tough, and yeah, Mordor in this situation going to be in a rough spot. I mean, you can see here, Corrigan is moving forward. Let's go back up to 1 speed. Warriors of Khazad moving in. Heavy Goblin Crossmen shooting away. And they're going to be able to shoot into the backs here. I mean, I think Valsarion is maybe a little bit unprepared to deal with Corrigan's master plan here. And I think that is starting to show. I mean, there are very cataphracts over here. It is kind of on Khand as well to maybe try and give some support. Well, there is some Ettenmore's Troll Hunters over here who are going to throw some javelins into the Warriors of Khazad though, and not the very cataphracts, which is unfortunate, because to try and disable this unit of Khandish Riders is going to be very important, I think, because I think they're going to try and go after the Axe Throwers. The Ettenmore's Troll Hunters, after all, are spearmen at the end of the day, but the Dwarves are coming forward, but they're not coming forward with everything. And against the sort of thing that Corrigan likes to do, if you don't sort of go forward and roll over his layers of defence quickly, that can be the death knell for your army. Now, playing as Khazad does give you a little bit more leeway because of your quality and your durability. So even without everything, Khazad may very well be enough. It may very well be enough to deal with Corrigan's forces, to be honest with you. But maybe not as efficiently as they would like. Meanwhile, over here you can see White Uruk Fearmongers, they may be AP. They may have a phalanx. But again, the Sons of the Fallen are so strong that they're already shaken here. So Corrigan's scattered approach maybe not working, and again doing what comes naturally to him and retreating. There are some Rhudaur forces over here as well, quite a few Rhudaur forces in fact. Dunman Spearmen revealed themselves, but Dunman Spearmen against Mithril Guard, I mean, need I say more? Rhudaur Axemen revealing themselves. There goes what must have been the Mordor General, or actually may have been the Khandish General. That was the Windblades. Guards of Khazad going up against the Axemen. I mean, at least the Rhudaur Axemen are AP, but they need support if they're going to do a lot of damage in this situation. There's Swordsmen. There's Ettenmore's Troll Hunters. The Miners at least will lose to the Rhudaur Swordsmen. But it's nice to see that at least Rhudaur are trying to give Corrigan some support to try and deal with Khazad. But this, of course, leaves the way open for Khand to move in on Rhudaur's centre, which they have done, actually. But the Rhudaur Swordsmen overwhelming the Variag Warriors. There are some Nomadic Light Infantry and Halberdiers coming in now, though. Maybe Khand also guilty of not being as aggressive as they could have been. Rhun, it's understandable why Rhun haven't been aggressive through the middle, because they did send off quite a lot of their forces to assist Isengard. And there are also those Dragon Knights still there. Angmar, meanwhile, still haven't gotten their swords bloody. Inas Rim now retreating from the front line. You can see that pretty much Mordor's assault is in tatters. Isengard victorious for the most part. You can see there's some runic soldiers, the Eastron Guard, trying to cleave their way through the Mordor backline. Temple Executioners fighting hard in a last stand situation, but of course they are not going to be able to come out of this alive. A bold effort from Wilson, but he was always really up against it in this situation, unfortunately for him. Nazkai, victory seems certain, killing off what's left of the Temple Guard. Meanwhile, there are still some Olag-hai, to be fair. 5 of them did survive the initial pressure from the Champions of the White Hand and the Warg Riders, and they are killing off Snaga skirmishers en masse, and Half-Orc Spearguard are not what you want fighting trolls. But it's only a matter of time, of course, before the Nazkai turn their attention on the trolls, and that is definitely the sort of matchup that will favour the Nazkai. Even if both units were at full health, And Isengard now starting to gather their forces over here to start pushing into the Midland. And then, of course, Rhun will move forward, Isengard will move forward, Khan from the other side, and the village will be isolated. And Angmar then will not have the ability to be aggressive in any one direction, which is Angmar's main strength, of course. So, I don't know what Starkiller X is waiting for, but that golden age where he can just roll forwards, use his witches and be utterly dominant is never going to come if he just sits there. Warriors of Khazad are routing, and Khazad, to be fair, you know, with the support from Rhudaur from the side, they have had to split their forces a little bit more, and that's exactly the sort of thing which Khazad would have been hoping for. So maybe all is not lost for the red team. See their First Legion pikes coming in. It will still cost the Misty Mountains so much to finish Khazad off though. Heavy Goblin Spears are over here. They're going to finish off the Sons of the Fall. Well, I say finish off, there's still 75 of them. Javelins coming in from the skirmishers. AP attacks from the Heavy Goblin Spears. I mean, you know, should be good to kill off those Sons of the Fallen if they can get the right position to fire. Khan are now coming forward with far more support for Khazad than they were initially, which maybe if they were going to do this they should have done it sooner. But the Variag Bowmen are going to come forward trying to support Khazad's push into Misty Mountains territory. In comes some Nurad Halberdiers as well, Heavy Goblin Archers. I mean, Khazad, all he does really is make himself really awkward to fight with his techniques, shall we say. But there's nothing wrong with that, I suppose. Rhudaur Nobles, Rhudaur Rangers firing into the Carmel's Dragon Knights. Rhudaur Pikemen turning around as well, so they will be doing massive damage to the Dragon Knights very quickly. I mean, the Rangers are going to get charged now, which is very bad news for them. One of the tools that Rhudaur still have, which would be very, very useful. Khand over here are not really doing much, though. And you can see over here some Variag Warriors moving in, some Nomadic Marauders, which I think actually had ammunition and were just engaged in melee by the Rhudaur Swordsmen. So credit to Rhudaur there, seeing an opportunity and taking it. Angmar are now moving forward, but it's in a long, thin method of assault, which I don't think is the right thing to do. Again, Angmar may... I mean, it's good to see that Angmar are at least thinking about deploying themselves in this battle now. Assenmall's Troll Hunters moving forward, heavily armoured Rhudaur spears in melee. Heavily armoured by Rhudaur standards at any rate. And the Dragon Knights starting to lose unit models now. One of the tankiest units of cavalry in the game. Meanwhile, Warriors of Khazad getting into the Goblin Infantry, killing them off easily. Very easily with the support of the Brotherhood of the Sword. There's also some Variag Horse Archers moving right round the back. Some Warg Riders from Khazad starting to rout. But yeah, with the support now arriving from Khand, the isolated nature of the dwarves on this front line is maybe starting to tilt back the other way, and Khazad's wave-based defences are not going to save him here, I don't think. Black Urks the Mountain looks like they're at least going to defeat the 4th Legion Shield Guard. More projectiles coming in from the Variag Bowmen. Variag Bowmen are over here. This is the sort of thing which I find absolutely baffling from Khazad. Like, he doesn't move his units. When he's in a position, he just sort of stands there and waits for the other team to do what they will to him. Which is, it's very strange. I've never seen anyone play the game quite like him. A very unique case. Volk's champions, meanwhile, I mean, with cavalry at least you have to move them. And he's going to chase the Variag Horse Archers off, which is good to see. Some Rhudaur Swordsmen routing through the Snaga Skirmishers. I mean, these crossbows should be able to do some decent damage, but I mean, there's really not much left of the Misty Mountains infantry at this point. You can see over here, Mithril Guard, Guards of Khazad were always going to be very dominant against the lower tier Rhudaur units they were going up against. What have we got going on over here? Snaga Stalkers on their way across. Angmar Halberds, that should be enough to drag what's left of the Dragon Knights down, and they're routing anyway, so it doesn't matter. Rhudaur now really coming forward against this pocket of Khandish infantry, sending forward some Witch Realm enslavers. I mean, here, Angmar are moving forward now. Angmar are being very aggressive now when it makes the least amount of sense to be aggressive. Like, they went forward into Rhun when Isengard have got what it takes to come in from the side against them. Again, baffling choices from the Angmar player, to be honest with you. Uruk-hai pikemen moving in. I mean, to be fair, these trolls will be able to do a lot of damage to the Dunland clansmen and to the pikemen. And it's not as if, you know, Isengard have had to sacrifice some of their manpower against Mordor. But I still think they'll have enough in conjunction with the runic army that was over there to deal with Angmar in this situation. I mean, especially when you've got stuff like Berserkers on the way over. Berserkers will be fantastic here against stuff like the Blackwatch Legion. Now, this, however, is a little bit of a different story. The Witchers coming in, doing some good damage to the Uruk-hai pikemen and to the Dunlending clansmen. And Lord knows Starkiller X is going to need these Witchers to do some heavy, heavy damage. And they do, right into the centre mass there. Maybe not the most high tier of units there, like when you really consider it. Like Eastron Guard, Nar Rim, the most expensive unit in there are the Uruk-hai pikemen. But they desperately need those Witchers to keep doing that, because they're in such a poor position. Gamp Rim moving in to support the Scion Rim against the Guardians of Khan Doom. And those are Halberdiers. With the Gamp Rim there, that should tilt in favour of Rhun, to be honest with you. There are some Blackwatch Legion ready to support as well. In come the Witcher-Hound Blackguard. I mean, thanks to those Witcher volleys, Angmar do have a chance at taking on both of these forces and winning. The problem that they will run into eventually, however, is just with the continuous advance forward of Khand and Khazad. Corrigan is not going to be able to stop this. There are the Goblin King's bodyguard. Heavy Goblin Spears trying to deal with the Brotherhood of the Sword. And with some rear charges from the Bolg's champions, those Brotherhood of the Sword will go down. Meanwhile, over here, some more Khandish resistance, some Veriag Bowmen, as well as some Sons of the Fallen on the front line trying to batter their way through these heavy Goblin Spears from the front. Defeat seems certain for Valsaria. Nomadic light infantry moving in. I mean, to be fair, where are the dwarves in this? Like, there's not many dwarves left when you really consider things. Witch-Realm Enslavers doing some damage. I mean, when you really consider things, the red team aren't actually doing too badly. I mean, you see over here, some Khazad forces are sort of moving in from the rear, which, no, with those if those reinforcements had gone over there, Corrigan would have died easily. Heading over here, though, who knows? There's still a fairly hefty amount of Rhudaur forces over here. I mean, going towards Rhudaur as the dwarves would probably be my last target, just because stuff like the Enslavers and all of the AP that Rhudaur can bring to bear, not really the sort of thing you want to be dealing with. I mean, positionally, the blue team have had the better of this battle for pretty much the entirety of it. Meanwhile, Uruk-hai crossbowmen getting into melee here with the Gundabad Guard, who are guarding the rear of Angmar's army alongside the Trolls of Gundabad. The Witchers, that's probably sort of the last sputters of their ammunition, and they only killed off one Nazkai. The Gundabad Guard are going to block them from advancing, of course. Even with 24, like the Nazkai, oof, that's a big charge. I mean, I don't know, like the numbers discrepancy at this point might be such that the Gundabad Guard can win that fight. But still, Angmar really having to sort of plug holes in each defence as it props up. Uruk-hai Berserkers are over there. These Trolls are going to smash the Half-Orc Spear Guard into submission. Uruk-hai Berserkers are over there. Witch Realm of Angmar's Snaga Stalkers trying to get into position. I think with all of these runic reinforcements, it's only a matter of time before Angmar does start to take a lot of losses in certain areas. I mean, especially over here, like you can see that even with the Blackwatch Legion being committed to the front line, this is where Rhune's focus on AP and melee will start to come home to roost, I think. Angmar will start to struggle. Very chaotic battle all of a sudden. Rhudaur started to send over forces to maybe try and help Angmar out. Gamp Rim on the way across. I mean, here you can see the Nurad Stormguard fighting. Without support, this might be a problem for them, especially with the Enslavers, but with support, becomes a different matter entirely. Gamp Rim and Flag Rim as well, so decent units. Meanwhile, Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters being sent over here to try and block the advance of the Dwarves. Again, I feel as though the Dwarves should just be sending in everything, if they can help it, to try and smash through the Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters quickly. The Mithril Guard, especially with their AP, would be very, very useful for that. Orc Hunters firing in. So Khazad have really turned their attention to the central village, which means that Khand are going to have to be the ones to try and finish off Corrigan's army, which I'm not sure. They still have some Dwarven support in some warriors, and there's still some First Legion pikes as well. Goblin King Bodyguard, Bolg's Champions. I mean, with the Bolg's Champions over here, Corrigan should honestly win this fight. And then there's still the factor in the late game for the blue team to have to deal with the remnants of the Misty Mountains army. Could be easier said than done as well, so Very topsy-turvy battle, this. 121 heavy goblin spears coming in, goblin infantry. Like, a lot of these units are not overly special, but again, there's quite a lot of the Khandish forces over here are stuff like nomadic light infantry. Not the sort of thing you want to be sending against heavy goblin spearmen. And expecting to win, anyway. Spear guard moving in. The trolls retreating back. Uruk-hai berserkers getting overwhelmed, but just the fact that Isengard are pushing and pulling Angmar's focus all over the field is worthwhile. And the berserkers and the Nazkai will take a fair share with them before they go down. You can see here that seeing the danger that Angmar were in, Rhudaur were sending over some support, some units of Rhudaur swordsmen, but it's a bit late here as this front line's already being overrun. Clansmen and Flag Rim now getting into melee with the arriving Rhudaur swordsmen. Trollshaw Axos in melee. There goes the Rhudaur general at the hands of the Storm Guard. Rhudaur's morale is decent for an evil men faction, but still, the loss of a general can be very significant. Gamprim, like all of the Loke units now, the Golden Boys, they're going to be able to finish off this defence as well, so several areas of concern for the red team. Here you can see some Uruk-hai berserkers preventing the Rhudaur clansmen from reaching the front line and reinforcing. Uruk-hai berserkers' victory seems certain now, alongside the Nazkai, so it goes to show they're really not to be taken lightly. And I mean, the Gundabad Guard are all well and good, but Dunman Spearmen are very low tier, so chances of them doing a lot of damage to such high-end units are very limited indeed. But yeah, the Misty Mountains are going to win over here as a result mainly of the dwarves turning their attention away. Like, if the guards of Khazad and Mithril Guard and Hammers of Gundabad and what was left of the Dwarven archers came over here, the Misty Mountains would be gone by now. As it is, Corrigan's still alive. And of course it's Corrigan, so he's not going to come to the aid of his allies, he's just going to sit in his deployment zone and wait. Wait for the exhausted remnants of the blue team to make their way to him. Meanwhile, here you can see Dunman Spearman victory seems certain now, so Gundabad Guard going to peel off the front line, try and support this area over here. The Trolls getting in here. And now with the Trolls, with the Witch Realm Blackguard over here as well, once again the tables turn in favour of Angmar. And as a result, Sauron, I mean, Sauron and his particular army in Mordor may have died very early on in this fight, all things considered, but his loyalists may still be enough to defeat the Separatists here. Let's see. Witch Realm Enslavers still giving a very good accounting of themselves, even though their general did die off. The Gamprim routing off. Obviously those very dangerous AP attacks are going to be enough to really cleave their way through the Flag Rim in particular. Franadine Pikemen also moving forwards to help shore up that front line, and those pikes are also going to be very key because the Storm Guard of course cannot reach the same level of range. In come the Hammers of Gundabad. Yeah, I think now is the time where the Dwarves really need to be thinking about moving in and supporting with their elites. I think they've waited too long already, to be honest with you, Khazad. And once again, like just as I said for the red team, if the blue team end up going on to lose this fight, it's because too often some of their forces have just been stood around waiting. And the Dwarven player is the main culprit in that, I have to say. Meanwhile, in come the Orc Hunters into melee to support the Berserkers and the Nazkai, which will of course be more than sufficient to deal with some Dunman Spearmen. Light work really for them. What have we here? Gundabad Guard. Yeah, I mean, Angmar are going to win over here now, definitely, with Trolls, Gundabad Guard, Blackguard, the support of the Rhudaur Swordsmen. Easy days for them. Not sure what the Scion Rim are doing moving over there, because they'll just end up dying as well. They may as well just stay over here. They are good. Stay over here and deal with these Rhudaur clansmen as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and then move as one big group to try and engage that Angmar block. Definitely the right thing to do. In come the Iron Watch of Miramir, which to be honest with you in melee is probably where they're at their best. They are after all still a multiple HP unit and very capable of looking after themselves in melee, using their sort of handheld ballistae as weapons. And that should be the end of the Rhudaur clansmen, to be honest with you. They should rout pretty quickly. Over here, some Dwarven pressure coming in from the rear. These Dunman Pikemen being caught off guard by the Orc Hunters and by the Hammers. But Rhudaur victorious from the front, and Corrigan with his Bolg champions proving to be the key to that. And he is actually moving. My word, look at this. Corrigan moving forwards in a battle. I never thought I'd live to see the day. But also, Corrigan's Bolg champions are heading over here. I mean, it's probably good for Rhun that they just were able to break the Rhudaur clansmen, and the Bolg champions won't be able to hammer and anvil them to the extent maybe they were hoping. But I mean, 13 Bolg champions in the late game, that is substantial. It's a lot of runic infantry though, and to be fair, not a huge amount of... well, I say that. Yeah, I mean 8 Blackguard, 1 champion of the White Hand, some Gundabad Guard, Rhudaur swordsman. I don't know, it's a very closely fought battle here. In terms of quality, there are still dwarven infantry units which are just sort of sat around doing nothing, I have to say. Or at least there were. Yeah, there's the Guards of Khazad. 32 Guards of Khazad, much like the Bolg champions. Again, just all on its own. That's such a significant unit to have in the late game. As they do. Snaga Stalkers moving in. Going to try and get a rear charge here on the Uruk-hai pikemen. I mean, they're only Snaga Stalkers, but if you can catch pikes out of formation, their low stats can be a real problem. Or lower stats. Uruk-hai pikemen are not quite on the same level as the cheap pikes, where if you catch them out of formation they die in droves. What are they fighting against in there? Is that one of the Nazgul? I think it is. So Mordor have been alive all this time. They've managed to sneak their Nazgul over here. Back come the Witcher-Elm Blackguard. I mean, this runic resistance now, getting caught up on that one Nazgul, might prove to be a massive factor in this battle, because sending over this pocket of Gamp Brim to just be killed basically could prove to be a fatal error by Hazrama. As the Gundabad Guard and Witcher-Elm Blackguard returning, there's only 8 of them, but that's still substantial enough if they have support to make life very difficult for a unit such as the Flag Rim. Still this one troll in here, which is going to be capable of doing damage every time he swings his club. The Scion Rim need to sprint, honestly. The time for walking is over. Finally, there goes the Isengard General at the hands of the Bolg champions. What have we got going on over here? Again, the engagements at this point are so scattered. Khand are moving over here with some nomadic light infantry. Isengard and the dwarves are going to win that fight though. Still some Mithril Guard and Guards of Khazad. Like, that's why I say that. Like, Guards of Khazad getting in here. They've managed to sort of push into the pike formation. I mean, if the pikes can push the Guards of Khazad back to arm's length, and then what's left of the Witcher-Elm Enslavers can maybe try and do that AP damage, they might be able to kill off the Guards of Khazad here. But I don't think they can do that to the Mithril Guard as well. The Mithril Guard are going to block the advance here of the Misty Mountains. I know, I think just in terms of numbers of infantry and quality of infantry, I think the blue teams still just about have the edge. But it's narrow. In come the Uruk-hai pikemen. Moran on halberds from Mordor coming in, so Mordor still putting up a fight here. Mordor are going to engage here with Khand. I think this is pretty much all Mordor have left though, and I can't imagine they're going to last very long because they were already shaken. I mean, nomadic light infantry are poor quality infantry. You'd expect them around on halberds to beat them, to be honest with you, but based on numbers, based on morale, that may not happen. Although the nomadic light infantry is wavering as well. Ultimate battle between cowards here, I suppose. Rhudaur swordsmen. In come the Uruk-hai pikes, surrounding what's left of Angmar and destroying them. There's still that one Nazgul in there. The Bolg champions could still be used to such good effect, but not going after routing units, I have to say. They need to hammer and anvil the runic line over here. It's risky with all these pikes around, but I feel as though you need to do it. Or head over to try and hammer and anvil the dwarven elites. So it comes down to just pure melee prowess. Yeah, the Iron Watch of Miramir surrounding Rhudaur at this point. And Valsarion able to do some good work there. And I don't think Corrigan's going to be getting back into the settlement. There are some Goblin King bodyguard over here. Some heavy gob crossbows. Yeah, I think that's it for Rhudaur. So Rhudaur may be the first player to go. Mordor may also have just admitted defeat. seeing all of his troops either routing or killed. I think then the one Nazgul that was remaining has been slain on this front line. Angmar over here being destroyed. Flag Rim routing off. Bolg champions still a real factor in this battle, but Rhudaur swordsmen routing off. All of the units really within the settlement at this point are routing. Again, I don't think the Bolg champions, this isn't going to be a happy hunting ground for them, because there are pikes over here. They could get some decent charges on the Scion Rim, but spears, halberds and pikes, the three kinds of units that you just don't want to be anywhere near with your cavalry, if you can help it. Charging across with the Bolg champions. And now, the ultimate staring contest will commence, because there's no way Corrigan moves in first. There are some heavy goblin crossbows who do still have some ammunition, to be honest, and they're going to need to use every last bolt to good effect if the red team are going to win this fight. On something like the Mithril Guard. Flagrim are routing. Here are the Bolg champions, to be fair. Finally coming over here where they probably should have been before, although they lost their bottle once again. Very interesting dynamics in this fight. 4% the difference so far. And to be fair, I mean, it's 4% in favour of the red team. But having said that, if you look at what Corrigan has left in terms of the quality of these units, I can only imagine it's going to be, I mean, yeah, like the dwarves, they should have moved in sooner, to be honest with you. Because now some pot shots from the crossbows, and you never know, the heavy goblin crossbows could be enough to turn this fight around, the differential being what it is, but I mean, you're asking an awful lot here of the heavy gob spears to have to deal with the finest infantry units that Khazad have to offer. Certainly Khazad and Imladris, to my mind, are the two scariest infantry factions in the game. You could add Numenor into that, but I think Numenor, the Seafarers of Nindamos and sort of the ranged support they offer affect that a little bit. Whereas Khazad and Imladris, their infantry can stand on their own and still be dominant. Goblin King's bodyguard going to try and flank around. But across comes Bogdan's pikes. Hazrama's Scion. They should probably just sprint at this point. There's no sense in trying to save fatigue, and indeed that's what they're doing now. Iron Watch of Miromir coming in. Yeah, victory seems certain for them. I think the crossbows, while they're routing, interestingly enough. In come the Goblin King's bodyguard, trying to wrap up the line as quickly as they're possibly able to. But in comes the support. Through the meadows. And I think the blue team are going to be just fine here. Flanking attack, AP, it won't matter at this stage. The quality is simply too far against them. Iron Watch and Miromir are no slouches in melee either. There may only be 19 of them, but again, when you're talking about these multiple HP higher tier units, even small amounts of them can still be very, very important. There's Barlin as well. Heavy Goblin crossbows moving across. They've got their swords out though, which is a bad sign, because they're not going to be up to much in melee. The heavy goblin spears are trying their best, but even in formation as they are, it's not going to be enough. The heavy goblin crossbows did return, and they immediately rout those crossbows as they try and engage the Iron Watch of Miromir. Orc hunters moving in. What's happening with Rhun? What are they doing? Ah, the Snaga that were trying to flank around, intercepted by what's left of the Golden Boys. Bolg Champion's going to try and do the same, I would imagine, but now all Rhun need to do really is put their Scion Rim behind, facing backwards to make sure no hammer and anvil can occur. Snaga skirmishers getting into place, but it looks like they're out of ammunition as well because they've got their rusted curved blades out. Very close though. Very close in terms of numbers, but you can see here that just in the late game the quality just wasn't quite there for the Misty Mountains to be able to do this, and the heavy goblin spears routing in the face of the Mithril Guard and the guards of Khazad. Goblin infantry revealing itself, but again I'm not really sure why they were all the way over there. You may as well consolidate your forces and give them the best possible chance. Not that 48 goblin infantry would have made the difference in this case, but again, old habits die hard for Corrigan certainly. Heavy goblin crossbows reloading. Going to be able to get a few more volleys in before they inevitably get engaged in melee and rout on contact. Guards of Khazad, they took damage, to be fair, the Guards of Khazad in that conflict, but... And here you can see Goblin King's Bodyguard defeat seems almost certain. The AP from the Mithril Guard will make all the difference there. The Volks Champion's trying to charge through, but with Scion Rim and Gamprim in the way, that was always not really going to happen. In come the Uruk-hai Pikes, taking damage. I think they weren't actually the target, but all comes to Khazad already in melee. The Uruk-hai Pikemen now joining in, as will the Guards of Khazad. And this won't take too long to rout off heavy Goblin crossbows, you would think. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Mithril Guard. Victory is a distinct possibility. Goblin King's Bodyguard. Defeat seems certain, especially now that the Scion Rim are on hand. In come the Volks Champions to do some pretty significant damage to the Easterlings once again, but again, every time they do this now, because of the size of their unit, they're obviously going to take losses. Balin dies though, so it will cost him his life to see this battle over the line. Where are the Iron Watch anyway? They're over here. What are they doing over here? Goblin Infantry are routing. I mean, the Goblin King's Bodyguard are giving a pretty good accounting of themselves here, in spite of the fact they're surrounded. I mean, in terms of bodyguard infantry units, they're not generally thought of as being one of the strongest, and they're not, but it does go to show that even they can withstand a decent amount of punishment. Gamprim finally going to be able to catch up with the Volks Champions here and try and skewer them, but not kill any of them. Azog once again managing to wriggle away. There go the spears. All of those Misty Mountains units once again routing off. And it's only a matter of time here, but got to give the Misty Mountains credit. They have put up a decent fight here in the late game, but in the end the battle has flicked, well, it still hasn't really flicked back the other way, because so much of the Misty Mountains army is actually routing at the moment that, technically speaking, the Misty Mountains still hold a 1% advantage. Though of course we know that this fight's only heading in one direction, but a good quality fight nonetheless. And this map, it does, you know, maps like this are the reason why I really despise the grassy plain, because when you see all the different kinds of engagements that happened, all the different areas of interest during the battle, like, it's so much more interesting to behold than just a flat fight on the grassy plain, which is so dull and boring. This is more what I think of when I think of Total War, like interesting maps, not just flat green squares. And the Winter Hamlet is a very well thought out battle as well, because it doesn't give any one team a significant advantage, and there are also the hilly areas on both sides were bits we didn't really see in this battle. It was all focused around the village and the woods on both sides, and that's going to be the end. Goblin King Bodyguard are gone. There goes Azog, skewered by the Scion Rim at long last, and that's going to be it, victory. And I do think the blue team deserve it. I think that they ultimately were able to support one another just better all round than the red team were able to. I also feel as though the red team, again, like, I still come back on that early game, like maybe I was a little bit harsh on Rhudaur and Angmar, but they had the opportunity there to just be fully aggressive, like right through the middle, right up the pipe, and smash the skeleton crew that Rhun had left here, especially with Angmar. That is what Angmar are designed for, and even Rhudaur, to a lesser extent with their AP, could have offset that brilliantly. In the end though, they didn't have the stomach for it, and you know, they ended up getting shot up, and that played into the blue team's hands. The blue team did very well, especially against Mordor. I kind of feel sorry for Wilson, because he was the one that was sort of on the receiving end of the best of the blue team's teamwork. Rhun and Khan sent over support to help Isengard really deal with Mordor very efficiently. And in the end, Mordor received very little in the way of support from his allies. But, you know, Corrigan, very good last stand, I have to say. Like, again, it's a very interesting way of playing that he chooses. And it's kind of, if you don't know how to deal with that sort of thing, it can be very, very frustrating to fight. And in the end, he put up a good showing. Rhudaur as well, I have to say. Like, I think Rhudaur of all the red team players probably, well, impressed me the most, purely because they were able to engage across all different fronts. Rhudaur are not well renowned for being one of the most durable factions, and yet they were difficult to get rid of for the blue team, and that you can't really ask for much more than that. Angmar did well when they did engage their witches. They did have to use their witches as a bit of a crutch, though. Without the witches in this case to really break up that flanking assault from Isengard, I feel as though Angmar would have been dealt with in a similar manner to how Mordor was. But that's just supposition, like ifs, ands, buts, and maybes. But let's see what did the damage for Isengard, because Saruman and the Separatists were victorious in this case, and Uruk-hai pikemen doing very well on the front line. Like, they were ever present throughout. Very reliable unit for Isengard as ever. The Nazkai doing very well as the Uruk-hai berserkers, doing a lot of damage initially to Mordor, and when they came across they were at least able to survive a little bit longer against the Angmar pressure. The mounted units did okay, but really Mordor fell apart very quickly when Isengard truly committed themselves, and the crossbows doing okay as well. So crossbows and pikemen, as well as the AP infantry, proving to be the MVPs for Isengard, which isn't too surprising because that is almost certainly what Bogdan's plan was from the very beginning with the composition that he chose. But yeah, a very nice battle indeed in this fight between evil factions. Khazad getting involved for a bit of money, I'm sure, as well. And yeah, Saruman victorious. So his plan to overthrow Sauron has succeeded, I suppose. I'm not entirely sure where this battle would take place. I suppose somewhere in Gondor. But yeah, very, very good. Big thank you to Bogdan for sending this one to me. He did send me another one as well, which is on the Witch King Sanctum map, which I will do probably at some point within the next fortnight or so. We shall see. I've got a few other battles on Reforged as well, which I'm going to do, including a rather interesting free-for-all, which is like a 3v1v1v1, which is an interesting concept. There's no sort of theme to that battle at all. Everyone's picked all sorts of factions, but I think we will be doing that one at some point soon as well, just because it's such a unique concept that it's probably worth showing. But yeah, I mean, again, I feel as though I've done 2 channel updates rather recently. One for Christmas, obviously Christmas Day, because again, like watching a large battle on Christmas Day wasn't really going to be something which most people did, I think. And one was also in November, just to let people know where I stood with regards to what I thought was going to happen this year, which ended up not happening. As far as like, I feel as though like that it's a very fluid situation that I'm in at the moment, where things can change and sort of my plans and ideas of stuff that I could do will change. But one thing I think is definite, and that is that I need to have a little bit more variety in my content. Like, I feel as though that is absolutely necessary moving forwards, and I'm still not entirely sure what form that will take. Streaming is one option, but I feel as though I kind of would need a little bit of help to get started with streaming, because I'm not really sure where I'd even begin. I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to do it either. Like, I know that I think you have to use an encoder and stuff like that. But again, when you have no experience doing something, it can be a little bit daunting getting started, which is one of the reasons why I've been putting it off, to be honest with you. Also, the fact that doing it regularly is not something I could even promise, so it's not something I could have a schedule for. So again, kind of interesting there. There's also the more podcasty idea which I had, which probably will happen, to be honest with you, because the format that would take, which I'm not really, I don't really want to reveal too much about it, because it could end up not happening at all, much like how the streaming has sort of been put on the back burner. I think it would be very easy for me to do. Like, it would, it's the sort of thing where I could just sort of effectively flick a switch and just record, and it would happen naturally. So there is that which could happen, which is probably quite likely, just because again, it's the sort of thing where I could carry on doing my current schedule as it is, and it wouldn't impact on anything. Whereas if I were to do anything more substantial, I would need to sort of chop and change my current schedule a little bit. And my current schedule is the reason why people watch me in the first place. So kind of an interesting situation, like I said, but I do feel as though I'm not going to go into sort of channel update territory here and sort of make a whole video based on it, because I've done enough of that recently. But I feel as though my channel desperately needs some variety, because I feel as though my channel's in sort of like a perpetual state of in danger of becoming stale, and I feel as though that is very apparent now more than ever. Like, I need variety of some description, both for my own sake, but also for the sake of the health of my channel as well. But yeah, regardless, more Reforged will be on the way, because I do have several replays that people do want me to do, which will probably be the next thing that will come out. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.